You are listening to Podcasting 101 with RSS.com, getting you ready to launch and grow your podcast.
Hey everyone, Ashley here with RSS.com. In today's episode, we're chatting with Talib Jasir, founder of Afros Audios. We'll be chatting about the organization, its community, the upcoming podcast festival, and so much more. Enjoy the show. Alrighty. Okay, well, welcome, Talib, to the show. I'm so excited you could be here. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you, Ashley.
So tell me a little bit about your organization and how you got into the podcasting space.
Sure. So in 2017, I created a very, very short, limited rom-com series called The Fussings Until One of Us is Dead. It's a fiction series. And I didn't, at that time, it was something that I had been introduced to audio, radio dramas back in the day. You know, Ralphie sitting in front of the radio and The Christmas Story. And it's kind of like my first initiation where I was just like, wow, he's sitting there listening to a story and he's so invested in all of this. And that piqued my interest. And then as a teenager, I would be sitting in the back of my mother's car on the way to school, what have you. And there was always this, it's called Rush Par Morning Show. And they had this very short, I would say it was about 60-second, maybe 2-minute clip daily, which was a soap opera. And I literally hated this thing. It was audio, you know, and you could use your imagination to see everything that was happening. They were very, very skilled at that and getting these characters and these environments and everything across in an audio platform, and just intrigued me. And so it was something I wanted to do for many years. But, you know, like most humans, I didn't know what to do. So I did nothing at all for several years. And one day I involved myself into kind of a program to help me get out of my own way, to start thinking of myself as the creative that I actually am, instead of trying to hide behind curtains. And so one of the things that they asked was, what kind of goals do you have and what would you like to create in this course of 90 days? And I put the audio drama on there because it was something I'd wanted to do for years, but I just couldn't get myself off the starting block. And so immediately I wanted to say, you know what, let's just take that off because I don't think I can do it. And I was challenged to stick with it. And so it literally took the last month of that 90 days for me to cast, produce it, publish it, and all these things. And I got it done. And so that was something that, again, because I didn't know what to do and I didn't know where to start, it prompted me to want to, one, see more Black creators creating audio dramas. In 2017 is not what it looks like now in 2023. It's a lot of folks, but it wasn't then. And so I wanted to create a space where I could not only create community and resources and support, but I could also encourage people to join and do the same. And again, it wasn't what it's like today. So 2018, I established Afros in Audio in that very niched opportunity. And 2018, 2019, nothing happened, not one thing. So I was getting ready, because I'm a creative, throw it all away like I do, pick it up, put it down, say I tried, it didn't work, moving on. But for some reason, Afros and Audio just seemed like permanent. It seemed permanent for me. It didn't seem like something that I wanted to just stop. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who was in podcasting and I said, you know, I really want to keep this going, but I don't know how to pivot. And he said, you know, you should think about events. And to this day, and people have heard me say this, I think he met a 2-hour meetup. It was a 20-minute meeting, and I left there saying, okay, I'm going to create a 2-day conference for Black podcast creatives and audio professionals. And that's how it started. In 2019, we had our first conference in Brooklyn, New York, in person. And then COVID happened and we had to pivot very prematurely, not really having that as a thought. The first conference was hybrid. It was live streamed and in person, but it was never intended to be a virtual only conference. And so 2020, 2021, virtual. And then we just were able to have our in-person, again, hybrid conference this past October in Philly, Pennsylvania.
So, okay, you mentioned the challenge and how it kind of lit a fire under you. So I'm curious, like, do you feel like that was the same case whenever you went to that meetup and they just gave you that idea and you're like, okay, now I'm locked in. Now I got to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a firm believer in anybody that, knows me and has worked with me over the years. One, this community was built because I was seeking it, right? So I consider myself, as much as I am the leader and the founder and the CEO, still very much a part of the membership of what it is that we're creating. I'm learning every day from the folks around me. And I'm hoping that I'm, supporting others in understanding podcasting and all of that. But this was just a singular meeting with a friend of mine that I just kind of asked. And if I say I'm going to do it, then that's what has to happen. So there were times where it was that Homer Simpson GIF where he goes back into the bushes. Like, what was I thinking? I've never done anything at this scale before. I know my intention is there, but what was I thinking? I don't know how to do this. But yeah, once I say it out of my mouth, it's got to happen. So if other people hear me. So yeah, it absolutely lit a fire to make sure that I showed up in the way in which the responsibility is to show up for other people and to create a conference that provides the support and resources that our community deserves.
So whenever you announced it, what was the first thing that happened? Like, what was the experience like? Were people excited, or was there a lot of please come to my thing?
Well, of course, there's still a please come to my thing, because one of the issues is the access to marketing engines and funding and that sort of thing. And so I consider ourselves Afros Audio the little engine that could, because despite it all, it happens every year. And there's challenges. There's challenges with marketing. There's challenges for funding it, because it's expensive to run a conference, especially a 2-day conference. And so, just to answer your question, the first thing I did was I reached out to people who are already in the space. A lot of times people tend to create, and being a public policy graduate in social justice and all these sort of things, a lot of times people create saying, this is what I think you need and this is what I think you want. But we have to step back when we are in the business of building something, with talking to the folks who are already doing the work, and who already know their pain points and the things that they need in order to be successful. And so that's my first step. I sat and I talked with people who already had communities based around their podcasts, directories, that sort of thing. And then I organized a team to support me in pulling off the first conference.
Well, with something that big of a scale, I mean, like, for instance, the guy who started Podcast Movement, Jared Easley, we had him on the show, and he was saying that, that first year, there was no profit. In fact, he said that it was only recently they became profitable, and that's not why you start it. You start it because you're building the community. You start it because you're creating a community. Would you say that that was kind of the situation you felt like you were in?
Absolutely. I'm still in it.
Okay.
Yeah. I've yet to, and it's just transparent, and I'm fine with saying it, although I'm sure that people couldn't even fathom it, but I haven't profited from it one time yet. And so if that was the point, then we would have stopped year one, Yeah. So I know that with business, I have the acumen to know that things scale, and it's the work that we do and the continuous work that we do and the consistency. So we aren't there yet, but year after year, our support grows, our resources grow, and the more we have, the more we can provide and give to our community. And so that's the goal.
Whenever it feels tough, though, what keeps you going?
The people.
Yeah.
When we have the conference, those 2 days really ignite and validate why we're here. And more so why I'm here, in the first place. So it's a struggle, year after year. It's one of those things where, I do contemplate quitting. I do, and not because it's not working, quote unquote. It's that I have limited resources, and those limited resources make it very challenging, and it gives truth to the idea of the unequal playing field, and the value add that people, and when I say people, I should say companies, businesses, what have you, invest in communities and or missions that are not something that's aligned with them, whether they have a blind spot of the importance of it, and or just don't see the value in it. And so it's something that is a constant, I guess, wall we're up against, but something that I'm committed to making happen regardless of all of those obstacles that are just there. And it's not just there for my conference. It's there for podcast movement as well. We're still educating people on the power of podcasting and the opportunity and the viability of it. And so it takes all of us to make sure that that is our message, that this is a viable industry. It's an evolving industry, and we all have to do our part.
There's something so beautiful, though, about being driven by a purpose. And it seems like, you're very much driven by a purpose. And so even though you may not be getting the revenue yet, there's so much like profitability in terms of community and getting to know people. And so I'm curious, what it exactly is, for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, what exactly is the mission of your organization?
So our mission, Afros Audio Podcast Festival, is really, I had a few goals when I started. One of them was that the event happens, it's great, we all have a good time, but I really was committed to the day after. The impact, the connections, the networking, the ability to continue to work together, support one another, and really, again, understand that it's going to take all of us to make sure that the podcast industry stays alive. There is no industry without podcasts. So that makes the content creators some of the most powerful people in the room. And so really to understand that also, that people who are contributing to this industry that wouldn't exist without us, get to be a part of the decision-making and the success of it, and really wanting folks to understand that. The other thing is, again, I'm a community builder who was seeking community. And so I know that part of it. I know from the creative space. I know from the organizer space. I know from all these spaces how important community, when it's done with integrity and done right, and not based on capitalism and trying to poach from our members, but so that our community has access to one another, not that creating a community so that I have access to them. That is the mission. It really is to create a space where people feel safe, feel seen, feel championed, but also get the opportunity to grow their skills, and up level the quality of their podcasts and their content, and have the resources and the support year round that, again, they deserve, and is the true connector for sustainability.
Well, in terms of podcasting itself as a medium, in your opinion, what is the actual value of starting a podcast in the first place?
Well, there's so many in my opinion. I think that podcasting definitely has an entrepreneurial spirit about it. And that is just taking the initiative to stand on whatever it is that your message is or your voice is, and being willing to put that out in the world. So it's an output, it's a production, right? And so just the ability that a creative has to create something, complete something, and stay with something it's in and of itself, as a fellow creative, an accomplishment.
That's true.
Yeah. So that in and of itself, but there's also, for me, and this is my own personal message, and I actually just got off a call before this where I say that I have this conference and this community, but it's all a front, it's all a guise for people to really get that we are actually laying down a record of our lived experiences. We're laying down a record of our own perspectives, and it's something that will be a historical aspect of it. It's something that becomes a resource for future generations, and for understanding where people are and were in this century, in this decade, and since podcasts started. So I think it's a personal mission for me, and that is based on our history of oral tradition and storytelling. And so we have to, I think that podcasting and our stories are much like language when you have a mother tongue and it's not being passed down to your generations. Once that elder passes with that language, it's gone from that family. And so our stories are the same way.
So in a way, our podcasts are our time capsule.
It really is.
That's, I've never really heard of it put that way, but putting it that way, like, that's really beautiful. So where do you see the future of podcasting going?
I see it going the way that it's been going, but I also see that it's evolving. And again, I think that for once in the creator's life, that we understand how powerful that we are. Again, the industry doesn't exist without podcasts. And so with that said, we have to have some autonomy and some agency over how this industry benefits the content creator. And so one of the things that we're working really hard to do is empower the content creator to know that how this works, how this industry shapes our listenership, and all of this. We have a responsibility around that to make sure that, one, we are increasing active podcasts in the global market by Black creatives and people of color in general, but also that we say, I have a podcast, so that we can make sure that other people, we bring in that listenership and that data that then informs advertising and all these sort of things. Again, I just believe that the content creator has the power to really shape this. And that's what I'm hoping happens for the future of podcasts.
I hope so too. I hope that more advertisers start to recognize just how important it is for smaller creators and, even medium and bigger ones. But what's interesting is I've started to see just how many like celebrity podcasts are starting to come out. And I hope that they don't start overlooking the smaller creator, because yes, there are more than 5 million podcasters at this point in 2023, but of those, only 400,000 are active. And when you compare that to like the 80 million or 800 million, I can't remember how many it is, websites, we're still like small fish in a big pond. So we have this opportunity to really get our messages out there. So what would you say to the person who's thinking about starting a podcast but hasn't quite done it yet?
Well, one, I think that, most of our societies, whether you are American or another society, it's a deliberate act to believe that there's to operate in a scarcity. And what I mean by that is that, okay, there's already 5,000 podcasts on how to make money and podcasts on this or that. But there's only you with your voice and your perspective and your experience. And so really do that. People think about the podcast industry being saturated. It's not at all. You just gave a great statistic about how many states remain active. And that's some of the work that we're doing to make sure that there's sustainability in providing that support and those resources. So, YouTube is saturated, but that doesn't stop the million people who are going to upload a video today. And so we've got to really get out of a space of there's too many of them or it's too much of something. We all get to create and express in whatever way, and you will find your audience. There's that opportunity for that. And so for people who want to start. That's how you finish. I'm a life coach to creatives and entrepreneurs as well since 2015. Certified, and that again, was my mission, to support creatives and entrepreneurs of just getting out of their own way and understanding that their talent and what makes them great and what makes them great communicators or what have you is really not about that one person or the individual that's creating it. It's about all the people that are going to now see possibility in you and in your message and in the perspectives and experiences that you have. So it's actually important work to start a podcast and to make sure that whatever it is that's inside is able to come out. And I think podcasting is a perfect medium for that, because it also, for me, is a great piece of content that becomes a cornerstone. So many things can happen from a podcast. There are so many ways in which you can go, whether it's becoming a resource for different organizations or creating your own business or becoming, an expert on whatever topic that you have and speaking engagements and all these sort of things, or building a business. There's so many ways in which that podcast can become an extension of who you already are and what you're already creating, and or those goals. So I think this medium is something that will remain, and it's important that people jump in and get into it.
I agree completely. And you're reminding me of a quote from Marie Forleo. She always ends her Marie TV episodes with, "The world needs that gift that only you have." And it just kind of speaks to what you were saying about how you're kind of robbing the world of your gift if you don't at least put your message out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that everyone should start a podcast, but I'm biased.
Me too, because again, there are 8, we used to say 7 billion. Now we've just got the recent report. There's 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
And so, you have an audience, as my wife likes to say, there's a lid for every pot. So,
oh, I like that.
Yeah. There is an opportunity. There are people who are listening to you, and podcasting is such an intimate, medium, in that the listeners are choosing you. They're choosing what they want to listen to. They're choosing you as a personality, your production, whatever it is. And so get out of the way, create what it is that you want to create. And if you need support and resources and opportunities, there's more than enough out there to be had, whether it's our organization or others like Podcast Movement and PodFest and all these other great conferences and communities that are out there already.
Well, yeah, because the reality is we're all looking for someone like us that can talk to us. And so I think that's why it's so important for every ethnicity, every race, every country to have a podcast, because we all need to hear those messages of everyone.
Absolutely.
So now you said that you kind of got started in the fiction world. How does that look to you today with all these different storytelling podcasts that are still fiction based? What do you think about them? What's your favorites?
Yeah, I love them. I have a lot of favorites. Harlem Queen. There's a bunch. I could name them all, but there's I actually would love to point people to a resource, and it's called Black Audio Dramas Exist, and it's a directory of Black audio dramas if there's any interest in that. Also Podcast in Color, which is run by Barry and has been for quite some years, and that is a directory of people of color, podcasters of color, and then women of color community is another space. But I still love fiction podcasts. It's still something that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm still creating in that space. I'm also doing biopic, nonfiction podcasts, so storytelling, but from the nonfiction perspective. And so we have one out right now, and I actually recorded 20 hours of my grandmother to create her own podcast. Now she's 92 years old. I don't know, she'll be interested in listening to herself talk back, but I know that it's going to be impactful, and so I encourage people to do that too. Again, this is an opportunity. So even if it never gets that mainstream scale that most people dream of, and the celebrity culture of podcasting is kind of mixing up people's understanding of what the opportunity is here for independent podcasters, but the opportunity to tell your story and to tell the story of people who you care about, and reach the audience that matters to you, is real.
I want to circle back to something that you said. You had said that, you never know what could come out of podcasting. Now, one of the things that we talk about all the time at RSS is repurposing our content. Do you see a lot of that happening in creators that you speak with, that they're repurposing their content into more than just a podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have video, we have people who write, we have people who, again, use their podcasts, license their episodes and that sort of thing as resources for different organizations. So if you have something that's about women's empowerment, the opportunity is to collaborate and have some of your podcasts as a resource for these women and these or these men or these youth, whatever it kind of speaks to. I'm really big on prison reform and youth that are labeled at risk. And so the podcast that I just did, the biopic that I did, that's become a resource for not only people who are incarcerated, but also at-risk youth and different organizations that can go into, because it provides relatability, it provides possibility, it provides all of these things. And so I think that there's so much opportunity for repurposing, and it's just about having that exposure and understanding that is possible, because as creatives, we tend to kind of go in and work in silos and don't really look to our left and right for what else is possible, but also the support in making that happen. And so that's what we're here to do. And so every conference, we have a session or two about repurposing and what that can look like.
I never thought of licensing your episodes. I've thought of putting it in YouTube, or I've seen, turning it into a blog post, but licensing, that's brilliant. That's a really good idea. Now, speaking of licensing and doing different things with your podcast, I noticed that your organization has started selling merch. Now, one of the blog posts that we did on RSS was the do's and don'ts of how to sell merch to your audience. What did it look like when you guys were preparing, to sell merch?
Well, actually, I guess it wasn't selling. I was giving them away at our first conference.
Okay.
But
I thought you were selling them. I apologize.
Right. No, we're selling now. You're right.
Okay.
But the point is that it's brand identity. I mean, after the first conference, I got images from people who had went to Africa and they were standing there in their the Afros and Audio T-shirt, and someone sitting in a board meeting across from another person who they might not have connected, but they're like, look at what I'm seeing right now. This person has an Afros and Audio shirt underneath their suit jacket. It's super cool. So of course, brand identity is the main purpose for the merch. But when people love things, they want a piece of it. They want to have that as something that's a lasting memory from, I have tickets from places that I went, concert tickets and stuff. I still have those things because it meant something to me. I still have my daughter's stuff, things that matter and made me feel good while I was there. People tend to want something they can hold on to that's tangible. Because the memories are just that, memories fade, but your Afros and Audio shirt, hopefully it's quality and it won't fade on you.
And it's also a badge of pride, something that you can share with others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you kind of want to make sure gets out to people?
Sure. Well, the Afros Audio Podcast Festival, the 5th annual event, which we're super proud to make that milestone, will be happening October 21st and 22nd in Baltimore, Maryland, and also on the Hoover virtual conferencing app. We do have a community called Black Podcasters Association, and that is something that was existing prior to us becoming community partners. But we've been in partnership now for almost 2 years, and we have a great group of people and community members. And so that's been amazing. We have a new initiative for Black college students and Black youth organizations to really introduce, again, podcasting, educate podcasting to the newer generation who deserves to be a part of this industry in real ways, whether it's entrepreneurial or even a career path. We are tired of the conversation around we can't find qualified people to work at a production company or a platform or services. There are plenty of us out here, and you could just look on our roster of speakers to know that they exist, we exist. And so just the opportunity of building what we need to do, building our own table, but also making sure that we're at the existing tables and letting people know that we're here and there's opportunity inside of this industry for people to build a career. There's also transferable skills that people have. I used to only think in the entertainment industry and technology, but I've been talking to lawyers and educators who also brought those skills to podcasting. And so there's so many ways in which to get involved. And so we're simply doing our part to make sure that we increase the podcast in the market and increase listenership, but also introduce podcasting to folks who don't have a clue about it, because believe it or not, there's a lot.
Yeah, I do believe it. Now, so speaking of, what is stuff that people can do that are listening that they can do to support your cause?
Sure. Well, definitely follow us on social media channels at Afros in Audio, and to understand what we're doing, you can visit afrosinaudio.com to get more information about it, as well as we're looking for facilitators and trainers for our programs. We're always looking for funding. Our sponsorship campaign just started March 1st, and we'll actually be going out publicly March 13th. And so supporting in that, supporting and just getting the word out, letting people know that we exist, our community exists, our conference exists, and it has become one of the most anticipated conferences in the industry for Black independent podcast creators and audio professionals. I'm really proud of that. And so however you can support us, we're here to receive it.
So are you guys just on social media, or where can people find you online?
Yes, Instagram is our main space. We're also on Twitter. We're also on Facebook as well. But yeah, just letting people know that our tickets are going on sale the middle of March. Our sponsorship campaign is already going. And people come to our conference. They love our conference. And that's how we just continue to grow and become an event that people want to be a part of every year. Yeah.
I love everything that you've shared. And I got to ask you one question before I let you go. I always ask everyone this. What's one question? It's kind of just a fun one, but what's one question I didn't ask you really wish I had? It can be anything.
Sure. Well, one of the things do I have to say it back in question form?
Nope.
Okay.
You can say it however you want.
All right. Well, one of the things I really always like to amplify is that when I say that I built the community I was seeking, I always love to give props to my great grandmother who taught me community. And we grew up in a very small area on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I grew up on a farm, and we were surrounded by people who were aunts and uncles and cousins and all this sort of thing that weren't at all. But it really taught me what community looks like and feels like when it's not forced, it's not based on bull, and it's truly the opportunity for us to share our resources, support one another, amplify one another, and make sure that we all win at the end of the day, meaning that we're all sustainable, we're all eating, and we all feel safe. And so what we've created is an inclusive space. There are no identity politics here. If you're biased, it's on our website. I need you to go to another conference because that's not what we're doing here. We include everybody because all spaces, communities, events, what have you, should represent the society in which we live, and it's not monolithic. And so that is important to us, and that's important for safe spaces and communities like ours.
I think one of the big things that's come through this entire interview is you didn't see the community you were looking for, so you built it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like anyone who's listening to this, if you feel that way, build your community, start a podcast.
That's it.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. And I love everything that you've shared, and I can't wait for people to hear what we talked about.
I really appreciate it, Ashley and RSS. I thank you so much for having me and presenting this opportunity.
We were happy to have you.
Well, my fellow podcasters, we hope you enjoyed the insights, tips, and ideas shared in this episode. To learn more about launching and growing your own show, head over to rss.com/blog. And if you're ready to launch a podcast of your own, you can get started for free with your first episode on us. Thanks for tuning in.